Good morning, Idaho Exporters. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking about digital compliance and GDPR. Really exciting stuff. But we'll hopefully make it understandable, easy to comprehend, and my ambition, in fact, is at the end of the webinar you think, this isn't too bad. And also, this might even work in our company's favor to be GDPR compliant. My name is Susanna Hardy, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. Karen Parnell from Commerce, Idaho is also on the call.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, okay.
Good morning.
Karen.
All right. Well, I've got a couple of messages. Oh, we've got some other people joining, so that's great. Okay, I've got a couple of things to just discuss with my Millipole co-exhibitors, just a few reminders and updates before we actually get started into the webinar. Everyone should have their own logins for the exhibitor dashboard, and the logins are unique to you. So we at Idaho Commerce do not have access to your dashboards or to your logins. As the primary exhibitor, Idaho Commerce has completed the safety certificate and the partner registration for our booth. But please do visit the customer zone. You'll need your login to get in there for your information. And if you haven't done so already, please complete your catalog entry. The deadline for the catalog, the printed catalog, is tomorrow. So make sure that you can get in and get that handled today. And then also there's invitation cards that are available for you to order. They're complimentary, but you do have to go in and order them. And then I sent information out about the Innovation Awards. So if you've got a new product that you want to just launch at the show or be in a competition, that's available for you in that area as well on the website, the exhibitor dashboard. So the hotel room blocks, if you haven't grabbed your room yet, the hotel room block is still open and available. I'm going to release those rooms next Tuesday, October 1st. So if you're going to stay with the group, please get in and give them a call or fax in your credit card information so that you can get your room reserved in your name. And then I do have a correction to the booth number. We need to use our hall number as well. So our booth number is actually 5-F064. So if you've got any questions or you need assistance on anything, I'm even willing to call the hotel with you early in the morning and give them your credit card number with you on the phone. Any type of walking through the catalog entries, if you're needing assistance on that, I'm happy to help you with that. So I can go over the dashboard with you. So today we are really lucky to have Susanna, who's on the line with us, to cover the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a legal framework that sets the guidelines for the collection and processing of personal information from individuals who live in the European Union. So it's important for you to know your obligations. So we've partnered with IBT Online to bring you this information this morning so that you can be in the know and reduce your risks. Go ahead and take it away, Susanna.
Thank you very much, Karen. Okay, right, Idaho Exporters, here we go. Before I actually start, I wanted to also say a big thank you to Idaho Commerce, and in particular Karen. It sounds like you've just got everything organized for these people to go off and have a great trade show, and including even thinking about how to make sure that they are compliant with the law, because some of the fines that are being applied are now starting to get kind of like eye-wateringly large. So a big thank you to Idaho Commerce, and it looks like your exporters are in very good hands. Thank you, Karen. Brief word about me and about who I am, what I'm doing. So my name is Susanna Hardy, and I'm Chief Content Officer for a company called IBT Online. IBT, which stands for International Business and Technologies. We've been around for quite a long time, and we are 100% focused on online tools and exporters. So we build and manage corporate websites for exporters. So for an Idaho company, we'll build you a website that is fantastic in the UAE or in Brazil, or social media in Australia, or whatever it is you need in international markets. That's our space. That's what we do. And we are also 100% focused on, I'd say, small and mid-cap companies. I mean, you know, unfortunately, Apple and Nike, they don't need us. But we're really, really pleased when we can help mid-cap companies grow their business internationally. So that's who we are. What we're going to be talking about today is digital compliance, first of all, as a whole, some of the GDPR must-haves, the essentials of GDPR, and then I've titled something called Who is Who, because there are certain parts of GDPR where you have responsibility, and other parts where your in-market partners, your PayPal, your MailChimp has responsibilities, and then I've left a couple of slides at the end for possible solutions that you might want to think about, and some case studies to show you the kind of roadmap you need to go through to be GDPR compliant. And then if there's any questions, just, you know, this time at the end, and I'll open the mic, and if you have any questions, go right ahead. So there, let's start with sort of digital compliance for starters. So digital compliance, that, what are we talking about when we really talk about the entire globe online? I thought I'd just give you a quick reminder of what that means. We're an awful lot of people on the earth, 7.5 billion, 5 billion of us, 66% are using mobile phones all the time, and 4.5 billion are online. So nearly 60% of the world population now has internet access, and nearly 50% are using social media. So, you know, it's not just the US, I can say. In fact, the penetration rate of the internet is much higher in some countries than it is in the United States. So some people are even more hooked on the internet than you are. And how has this changed the way we've done business? Well, it's changed the way our company is seen and perceived in the outside world, and what information flows there are in the world about you, about your competitors, about your customers. And as a head of sales or a head of marketing, your objective is to influence all those black lines you see on the right-hand side of your diagram, to influence them in a positive way, to make sure that those customer-to-customer dialogues, you know, say something nice about you as a company. So someone says, hey, anyone know where I can find a really good camouflage hat? And the customer would say, yeah, I just bought one from Quick Camo. And you say, oh, right, okay, let me go and find that company. That's what you need to have for good sales and company marketing. So the internet has fundamentally changed that dynamic, and it has made it customer-centric. And that's an important point on that. Now, what do we need to do if we're looking to be online and we're looking to drive our business, build our brand online? There are basically three distinct points of it on the journey that you need if you're in sales and marketing. You need your clients to be aware of you, to consider you, and then to decide in your favor. And that's basically, in one slide, the buyer's journey. In order to do that, you need to have localized websites that get you found, understood, and doing business. And this is important where you are to see compliance coming in. So just to a quick one slide on saying how to be found. And again, this is about being customer-centric. It's important to remember that search engines are localized. The search engine you go to in Idaho is google.com. That is different from the search engine of Google that you go on in Australia or Canada or the UK. And it's very different from the search engine that a Chinese person in China would go on, that's Baidu, or in Russia, Yandex. But for now, let's just talk about Google. If you look at Google, think of Google, in fact, as 192 different Googles. Each country is localized because Google wants to be relevant to the searcher, not to you. Right? These are some of the background premises that I think it's important to establish before we start talking in depth about compliance, which we're now going to do. So that's a quick overview of how to get found. Make sure that the local Google thinks you're terrific, thinks you're relevant and understandable and applicable to the local searchers, so that someone in Germany going on google.de finds you, the Idaho company, to be relevant. Now, being understood is a different matter. Being understood, in fact, is quite a broad concept. One part of it is getting the translation right. That's language, yes. But there are other parts to being understood. And I would think that digital compliance and digital recognition is part of being understood. When I look at a website, I want to make sure that it is safe, that it is relevant to me. So for example, if I'm sitting in the UK, I want a website that says .co.uk. I want it to be safe. I want it to be HTTPS. The S stands for secure. And I want it to obviously have the right language and the right keywords. So I want to put that out there as a thought about that being digitally compliant is a way of building trust. And that can only be good for your brand and your sales. So just one slide then about localizing. And I've put on one slide the 10 criteria that we list for a localized website. And you'll see that language, for example, if you want to create a German website, it's not good enough to stick one page of German text onto your idaho.com website. It just won't be found in Germany because google.de won't find it. And if they do find it, they won't think it's relevant to the German searcher. So it's got to be localized. And one of the major parts of localization is regulatory requirements. So digital compliance. There's actually, let's talk about digital compliance now. GDPR really comes on the top of a heap. It is probably best in class, I think best in class across the world, and is seen as the top of that pyramid. It's come after quite a long journey, which we'll go on to in a moment. But GDPR, in fact, is the Europeans, in a sense, have always been the most concerned both with privacy and security. And they were the ones who first put in place cookie policies and privacy policies and all kinds of things like that. GDPR really comes at the pinnacle of this and is being watched by a lot of other countries and even regions. And it was GDPR, which was implemented in May 2018. Now it's got a good year track record, and I think that you'll see GDPR lookalikes coming on board and being adopted by a lot of other countries, including very close on the horizon, Japan, Brazil, Colombia, Australia. Those are the ones I can think of the top of my head that are implementing things that look just like GDPR, or they're not called GDPR, but GDPR lookalikes within the next 6 to 12 months. And already implemented or on the verge of, or certainly legislated, India, and Canada, which is anti-spam legislation, goes a step in that direction, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA. I thought I'd bring this up to you because this is your close neighbor. And you know, these Californians, they always like to do things a little bit differently. So California, as of the January 2020, will implement something called the CCPA. it is built on GDPR. It's in order to give the user ownership, control, and security. Now, the rest of the United States doesn't have to do this, but California as a first mover in this. And it comes into effect in January 2020. So, you know, GDPR is something that's being rolled out bit by bit, country by country, you know, slowly across the world. I think the days of complete Wild West internet are over in that sense. So I wanted to give you that background as well, just to say, you know, one way of looking at it is to say, if I'm GDPR compliant, then I'm pretty sure that I'm, you know, it's best in class, then I know that I'm compliant for India, Japan, California, Brazil, and all those other markets that I mentioned, and more. So that's one way of looking at it in a positive light. If I can get myself GDPR compliant, I'm good for the rest of the world. So now let's talk about some of the GDPR highlights. You know, what is GDPR? How is it done? What is it all about? Actually, GDPR has a long history. You know, the web was founded 30 years ago, and it was founded on the premise of data sharing, but also on the premise of transparency and accountability. But it wasn't regulated. It's never really been regulated. GDPR gets back to some of those basics, those underlying premise that the individual owns his or her data. So if you sign up to use an app or something, or if you tick a box, which nobody ever reads the T's and C's, you know, and then you download that, that's in fact remains your data. Now this is okay, you know, for most people, but I guess the pendulum has just swung too far in the direction of companies, in the direction of Facebook and Google. And there's a feeling of abuse and mistrust. There's a feeling of lack of accountability. There's a great saying on the internet, if a product is free, you're the product. You know, you can use Facebook for free. It is a free social media platform. But Facebook uses your data. It sells your data. Google, you know, you can go on Google for free, but Google sells your data. And somewhere along the line, you know, the question ultimately is, who owns that data? Your online persona is owned by you. And today that online persona is actually an asset that has a growing valuation over time. It's now bought and sold by advertisers, marketeers, political organizations, governments, all kinds of people. But ultimately, isn't that yours? Shouldn't you have a say in it? And that's where GDPR comes in a way, as I said earlier, GDPR is the end of 30 years of Wild West websites. So the EU implemented this, and you know, again, I want to say this is perhaps a good thing. Think of it as a positive thing. GDPR applies to 28 countries. So if you're GDPR compliant, you're compliant for 28 countries. The largest single trading bloc in the world, 17 trillion GDP combined compared to 18 trillion in the United States. You know, a big place. And with one, you know, GDPR compliant, all 28 countries. By the way, the United Kingdom, despite being in sort of political cloud cuckoo land at the moment, has said that they will be GDPR compliant and stick with it. So, you know, GDPR, as I said, for 28 countries. And Europe is a very, very, very plugged in place. 80% penetration rate of the internet versus what I said for the world, 60%. And very, very active social media users. So again, it's a very plugged in place that uses the internet and needs to be GDPR compliant. So what are the objectives? Why did people start this GDPR? There's basically a set of European Union rules for data privacy, and the underlying premise for GDPR is to give European Union citizens control over their own personal data, to give them rights over that data, to have sanctions in case of non-compliance, and to have applicability outside the European Union. So it is a global set of rules, and the sanctions are applied globally. And you can say, well, really? Come on. But in fact, it can happen because there's always, for each country has a sort of internet supervisory authority. And for example, in the UK, it's the ICO. In France, it's the FCO. So the Internet Commission Authority, supervisory authority, the United States has one too. And GDPR has signed agreements with all of the major supervisory authorities around the world that GDPR will apply to European citizens, including the sanctions. So, for example, the EU just fined Facebook a very large fine because it was not compliant with GDPR. The big question, does GDPR apply to US companies? Does it apply to me sitting here in Idaho? Yes. It applies to any company inside or outside the United States. Any company that offers goods or services to anyone who's a European citizen, no matter where that European citizen is. So if you've even got distributors and have information on them, that counts as a European citizen if it's in Europe. So it does apply even to an Idaho company. Okay, what happens if I don't have a subsidiary in Europe? I'm sitting here in Idaho, I sell my product to people in France and Germany or whatever, but I don't have a direct subsidiary. So am I really liable? Yes, you are, because the transfer of data is illegal. It is prohibited unless you are GDPR compliant. So if you are not GDPR compliant, you are not allowed to take data outside of the EU, even if you don't have a subsidiary in the EU. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. So what is personal data and what is processing personal data? What is this? Basically, processing is anything. It's collecting your purchase orders, putting them into your account systems, giving them over to after sales customer care, warranties. It's any kind of that processing. And what is personal data? Personal data, again, is really a very large bucket. It is the name, the address, the financial information. And there are very special guidelines if you're collecting anything that is either medical or biological biodata on people. That's a very specific sort of rabbit hole that I don't want to go down at the moment. If you are, then let me know and I can circle back to you at the end. There's an extra little bit for you at the end for GDPR. But apart from biological data, like health, for example, on people, anything else that is personal data is concerned with GDPR. What is not personal data? Anything that is anonymous. So if you're collecting data from Europeans that says info at or sales at or whatever, then it's not a person. GDPR is about a person. It's not necessarily about an organization. If you're getting information about, I don't know, Siemens in Germany, that is not GDPR relevant. GDPR concerns personal information. It's information about your clients, your distributors, your after sales people, who you're marketing to, who you're addressing, who's reaching out to you, and who you're reaching out to in Europe. And what are the rights that GDPR highlights? Basically, there are 4 rights in GDPR. Portability, in other words, I want to take my data with me. The right to be forgotten. If I unsubscribed, I mean it. I do not want to be put back on that mailing list within 2 months. I unsubscribe, take me off, put me out of your systems. The right to view their data, and that's a tricky one, and the right to make changes to their data. So very clear European Union citizen rights. And you'll find that is something that is mirrored in all the other digital compliance countries that I mentioned earlier, India, California, Brazil, and so on, Japan, they're all looking at those same rights. As I said, the GDPR is really the gold standard of it. So let's now talk about GDPR who's who, because this gets a bit technical and a bit sort of hopefully more meat inside of it. Within GDPR, you have something called a controller or a processor. And you are either, your company is either a controller or a processor of data. So a controller is the entity, you know, that who takes the lead. This means that when you're gathering up personal data, the controller has to make the subject aware that its data is being collected, and you have to ask for explicit consent. You know, you can't just say, you know, that going on this website means that you agree to our terms. You actually have to say, you have to tick that box to make sure that that you agree to my terms. You have to actually say, explicitly tick this box. You can't just imply that just going on and we'll give them the data. So a controller is the one who collects data for direct marketing purposes or company purpose. I put marketing in there, but in fact, it's any business purpose. For selling, for financing, for processing your finances, whatever. A processor is the person who takes the information from the controller and actually does the things. Typically, for you guys in Idaho, that would be your distributor, your agent. It could be PayPal. It could be Mailchimp. It can be Amazon. It can be a UPS, your logistics supplier, whatever. So and we'll give some examples of that in a second. So just to repeat, the key duties of a controller is to inform the data subject that you're going to be processing the activities. In other words, your privacy status, to honor the data subject rights, and to notify of any breaches of security. So if you have a security breach, if you're hacked by some nasty little whatever, you have to know what to do, and you have to notify the people that that have been hacked in your system. You have to notify your clients or whoever it is that has been where their data has been mined. And what are the duties of a processor? The key duties of a processor is to make sure that they're GDPR compliant. Is to make sure that the controller is respected, that the controller is that the controller's data is securely kept, is that the privacy is safeguarded, and that the instructions are fulfilled to the letter. So again, if, for example, you have Amazon in Europe, or you're selling via, or you're shipping via UPS into Europe, your processor is Amazon. Your processor is UPS. Your processor is your in-market distributor, and that can be PayPal. You can have several processors, in other words. Each one of them processes data for you, and it is your obligation as a controller to make sure they're doing it correctly. And I'll get into that. But first, I just want to say those are the key people that we talk about when we talk about GDPR, a controller or a processor. Right, let me try and give you some concrete examples so that we can try and understand what all this is about. So, what are the first steps about GDPR compliance? I think some of the very first steps is to understand your role as a company. Are you a controller or a processor or a bit of both? You know, where do you sit along that? And then you need to really sort of think about who, if you're a controller, then who's doing the processing for you of stuff, of your business, of your export business, and what are their roles? And are you aware of them all? Then you need to make sure that you have privacy policies and cookie policies that are up to date, and you need to map your subject data. You also need to have agreements with your processors. You have to have procedures in place in the case of data breach, and you have to appoint someone within your company who's going to be responsible for all this. Sounds like an awful lot. We've actually just broken it all down into little pieces to make it sure that we all get there and understand some of it. So let me go through some case studies with you and try and show you what happens on a sort of real life. And actually, the first case study, when I was thinking about this, the very first case study really is us. We became GDPR compliant. We did. And GDPR actually dates from 2016. And because we're like in that space, we're in the sort of online space because we built websites. So we were learning about this in 2016. And at first we sort of put our heads in the sand and said, oh, no, please, no, not more regulation. Then we figured, no, we've got to bite the bullet and actually we need to do this. Let me do this for our clients because this is a big tidal wave coming our online way. And we need to make sure that we do this for them. Because we build we build websites in Europe, and we also market to Europeans for our services. And we build websites for our clients. So are we a processor or are we a controller? Turns out we're both. We are a processor because we build websites for our clients. Our clients tell us to build websites for them in Europe. And therefore, we execute their orders and we process their data. We do a lot of marketing for our clients. We take their database, we market their database, so we process their data. We are definitely a processor. We also quite like to have our own marketing because we like to have some European clients too. And so in that case, we control our own data. And for our marketing side, we definitely are a controller. We also have service providers in Europe. For example, web hosting services, or we partner often with certain software platforms for e-commerce. Those are all service providers in Europe, and those are processors of ours, but we are in that sense the controller. We also have employees. We have employees in France, in Germany, and the UK. We are a controller of those employees' data. That makes us liable for GDPR compliance. So I hope I've tried to explain to you the difference between a controller and a processor. And for us, guess what? We're both. So what did we do? Well, the first thing we did was to say someone has to do this in-house and take charge of this. So we appointed someone, and it's important to appoint someone who's not totally junior, because the temptation is to say, you intern for 6 months, you do this. This looks tedious. It doesn't work that way because you need someone who has a strong enough view of the entire company, has the authority to go to the board level and say, you need to implement this, who can sit with the CFO of the company and say, do you know where our payments are going and how they're being stored? And can also go to the tech team and say, who are we hosting our servers with? So it's got to be someone actually quite senior who has an overview picture and who has a little bit of an understanding of the technology. So the first thing you do is appoint an individual. Guess who got that lucky short straw? That was me. The next thing you do is determine the role you have. Are you as a company a controller or a processor? And that was the previous slide that I said. The third thing that we did in-house was put everyone in a room and say, look, we've got to get on board here. We have to understand what we're doing. And you as salesmen, as web builders, as marketeers, as the finance department, the tech department of our company, we all need to gather around and at least have some understanding of GDPR. Leaving data on bits of scraps of paper is no longer admissible. Then, because we do a lot of marketing, we had to appoint a data protection officer. Again, that was me. Not all of you will have to do that. That is really, a DPO is really, there are different levels to it. A DPO can be someone who's just responsible in case of data breach, or it can be someone who is like a lawyer, most of you will just have to appoint someone like who's important, who knows, can be the same person who's directly responsible for implementing GDPR. The next bit is to map the data flows, and I'll get onto this in a minute. Then review our policies. How do we collect data? How do we manage them? How do we keep them? And how do we animate them, in a sense? And what happens if there's a data breach? So those are our policies. Those sort of 4 or 5 big policies that we have to look at. So case number 2 that I wanted to go on to. So once we became GDPR compliant, it was like, phew, now we can go help our clients. And GDPR came into effect in May 2018, and since then, all of the websites that we've been building are GDPR compliant, and then we went back to all our previous clients and made them GDPR compliant as well. And this is actually an amalgamation of a couple of different US clients we had. I just call them ABC company to try and sort of say, what kind of company is this? It's a US company, they export to Europe, they do not have a subsidiary, and they do B2B. And they sell via distributors. So, this is a company that have, in our case here, the case study, they actually had a couple of different websites in local languages. They were doing some marketing. They went to a lot of trade shows, and they had a bunch of in-market partners, logistic partners, payment channels, and distributors. So that is the sort of scene that we're trying to look at here. Now, how do we get them to be GDPR compliant? First thing we did was say, right, you've got to appoint a directly responsible individual. In most cases, it ended up being head of international sales for that. And then we talked, was it necessary to have a data protection officer as well? In 9 cases out of 10, it was not. These are B2B companies. B2C companies who do a lot of marketing, they probably do need one. And I can, if anyone needs clarification on this later, I'm happy to go down that as well. Then, as I said, educate employees, and this in most cases was me going up there and talking about them for about a couple of hours and see if there's any questions, and then determining the role. So all this looks pretty standard. This is what we saw with what we did, and in 10 cases out of 10. These are all controllers because this is the key company, and so they are controllers. Now, step 5 gets tricky. Step 5 is mapping data flow, and data is a funny thing. It has this way of just seeping into every aspect of your business. It goes from your sales, to your marketing, to your finance, to your after sales, customer care, warranties, guarantees, and almost all of our clients had different databases locked on different systems that weren't talking to each other. Finance department didn't know that they were collecting the same data as the sales department. It was interesting. But I think it was also interesting to start looking for them, to try and map this out. GDPR is not something you can do in one fell swoop. GDPR is a long-term process. So for most of these companies, they said, this is interesting for us, and this is good housekeeping. This is something we need to work on for the next 12 months, 24 months. We need to make sure that our back office is actually talking to the front office, for example. We need to make sure that we have client relationship management software in place, which is harmonized and linked in with our finance department, for example. Externally, data flows huge. It goes to the in-market partners, the distributors, the logistics suppliers. As I said, MailChimp, UPS, they all get your data. They all get this data. And as a controller, you need to make sure that they are compliant with GDPR. So I think this is the hardest part of GDPR. It's trying to understand what your data is and where it goes. And the key is what I'll put on this slide here. How is your data stored? What do you do if data is breached? Not just by you. What happens the day that UPS phones you up and says, "Hi, customer, just got to tell you we've had a massive data breach. All your data from all of your clients that's just been breached. Do you know what you do? Do you have a process in place? And then your databases. Are you buying in databases or are you building them organically? I think GDPR means that the days of buying in mass databases is kind of over because those people have not given their explicit permission. What is the lawful basis for you to have that person's data? Is there a reason to use that data? Do you have consent or not? So again, organic databases are the way to go forward. Oops, sorry. Yeah, this one. Next steps. The next steps is to inform the processors. You know, and all the big companies, MailChimp, PayPal, Amazon, they know this. And they have been contacted by all of their European people. And they all have signed a DPA, a data protection agreement. And again, if anyone wants one, I can go through that and show you what it looks like. It's a legal document. It can be drawn up by your legal counselor or a lawyer, or if you want to have more explicit information on it, I can give you more. Then you need in-house to have some procedures in place, especially for data breach. You know, again, what happens if data gets lost? And then finally, you need to have an ongoing process thing. Okay, this year we're going to do this. Next year we'll do that. And you know, every 6 months, let's review. Where are we now on data? Are we getting it together? Have we improved? Are we better at storing data more securely, more respectfully than we were last year? And that's all you need to do. And then, in my view, shout about it. If you are GDPR compliant, you need to tell your clients and your prospects that. It instills trust. And that's, I guess, sort of my nearly last slide. Think of GDPR as a good thing. It makes you more efficient. And it's an efficient way of handling it because it's throughout, it's going to be the gold standard throughout the world. And it makes you efficient because it makes you understand the responsibility between a processor. It makes you evaluate your partners and your internal processes. It makes you focus on your contacts and what they actually want to get from you. So you're not having huge mail outs or giant mailings and e-shots, totally inefficient. And you build trust, therefore build brand recognition and brand trust. You have increased transparency for data collection and processing. You're regulatory compliant. That is a good thing. That is a thing to be proud of and builds your brand. One last shout about us before I turn over to any questions. If I haven't bored you all to tears about compliance, we do have a product. If you want a GDPR compliant European website, we can build that for you very easily. Or if you just want to have your existing website compliant, we can also help you with that. Right. Are there any questions at all? I'm very happy to open to the floor, or Karen, I don't know if you can. I think everybody's on mute, so you've actually got to write down your questions in the chat box if you've got questions. Anyway, so there you go, GDPR compliance. I've put everybody to sleep right away. That's amazing. Compliance has that effect on people. I know, but it's one of those things. It's one of those things that one actually has to do correctly. So
Well, Susanna, this is Karen. Since I'm the only one that is unmuted, I have a question. So, okay. In addition to building websites and making websites compliant, you are able to also draft procedures for them and help them with strategies on what to do in the case of a data breach, correct?
Yes. That's all part of the package. And we are, When we started this GDPR thing, we were working with lawyers who were based in Brussels and the Commission and so on, and we took it, and it got very heavy. And in the end, I thought, no, it doesn't need to be like this. We can break this down into manageable steps. And data breach, a data breach policy at its best, I've looked at a dozen at least, or more. I looked at maybe 20 data breach agreements so far, I think, in big depth. They're pages and pages, and they're unworkable. And I have come to the firm conclusion and opinion that the best data breach procedure and agreement is a one-page document. It's something you can stick on the fridge. And that's probably where it should be. Great. In the canteen, in the coffee room. Simple, clear, defined, and not legalese speech. So that's very much our approach to this. To make it to be bite-sized and easy to work with, and something that a small mid-cap company can deal with.
Sure.
Yeah. I hope I haven't
scared.
I'm not
seeing any questions. Yeah. No, I don't think we've scared them away. Just
Kyle is asking a question.
Okay.
I don't know if he's go to questions page. I don't know. I'm not sure. The best one, Kyle, is just to put it in the chat box. That way we can see it. Or else I can unmute you. Up to you. But it looks like you're on a question page. Thanks. Okay, here's Kyle's question. Hi, thanks for the information. Do we need to have a website translated into German and French? I guess, if you want to do you want to sell in Germany and France? In which case, yes. Put it this way. If you were a German company and you were targeting American buyers, would you keep your German website or would you translate it into American English? Admittedly, most French and Germans speak some English, but you're really limiting yourself if you just put it in English. If you want to have a really great presence and be really found and understood in Germany, you need to have a German website. Yes, sorry. And German websites have to be, and French websites have to be GDPR compliant. Yes, they do. German websites have an added little thing called an impressum, which is authorship. And again, that's something that we can easily do for you. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Kyle. Any other questions there? I'm not seeing any. But I do wish you all the best. You have my email contact. If you want to get more information about GDPR or websites or online marketing, drop me a line. I'm always happy to chat and talk it through. And I wish you all a fantastic trade show event for this. I have, by the way, recorded this event, so I will send you all a copy of it with the slide deck, so that if anyone has insomnia,
that's great.
Okay.
Well, Susanna, we want to thank you very much for being on the call today. I know this is after hours in your neck of the woods. You're in London, right?
Yeah. No worries. I'm fine. Okay.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being on the call and sharing this information with us. I think everybody has a lot to think about, and especially my folks that are headed to Millipol in France, because that is the whole purpose of going. We want to sell product.
Yep.
So we appreciate you enlightening us on this. And by the way, I also, well, they'll get the slide deck, so they'll have your contact information. But I also have Susan's contact information. If you don't have it handy and you need to get in touch with her, I'm able to share that with you as well. So we appreciate everyone being on the call. So thanks so much.
Thanks, and happy exporting, everybody. And thank you again, Karen. Great job. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank
Have a lovely
you.
day,
Bye-bye now.
Happy exporting. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.